Good evening. Okay. Let's wait for people to join. All right. Good evening. It's Sandy Shellis, and tonight, welcome to That Was the Week That Was, our new show that highlights some of the articles that we have put up during the week on Facebook. And I have to tell you, it was a really interesting week. And I chose to highlight the one article, not one article, but the Smithsonian article that we put up on the sinkholes and why they happen, because I think that's really good for us to talk about first. And then I'm going to say hello. Hi, Lee. Hi, Kim. Oh, there's a lot of people here. This is great. Thank you for joining. Thank you very much for joining. I'm going to start out with showing you the article first. This is the article that I'm going to read from. It's from the Smithsonian, and I think it's pretty good, and it's got some interesting little tidbits in it about sinkholes. Then we're going to go on from there. Now, in the United States, it's Memorial Day weekend. People are out partying. They're doing all kinds of things, but I have been having a blast with this whole topic. And it has led me to places that I just had a lot of fun. And I will tell you, I have a lot of fun on Twitter. I never used Twitter before. President Trump or Donald Trump, 45, whatever. Hi, Liz. Oh, there's a lot of cool. So I started and I got on Twitter, and I'm having a real blast with Twitter. I have to tell you, there is so much funny stuff. And we are not living in humorous times. We're living in very serious times. But I can't help it. I have to find things funny, or else I can't make it. You know, I have to do it. So let's say hello to a couple of people. Dave. Hi, Dave. Dave showed up. How are you? And Richard's here. How are you, Richard? And Liz is here. This is great. I'm really happy that you're all here. I'm going to put this one down, and I'm going to start and make sure I figure this out again to get me up here. Wow, this is a lot of fun, huh? Okay, it doesn't really matter. I want to get the article down, and I'm going to start. Okay, so here we go. This is from the Smithsonian, and it was on our page this week, and it starts talking about this place in Florida called The Villages. Now, The Villages is a retirement community, and I did a little looking up about this place, this retirement community, where they're experiencing sinkholes. And what I found out was this place is really Republican-y. And these retirees go down there, and they're from all over, and they made a difference in Florida in electing Trump. They're, in a way, kind of evening out the Hispanic Democrat, liberal, progressive, whatever you want to call it, vote, and they're tipping the scales. But they're having major problems with sinkholes. And I find it ironic and funny. And I'm going to go and explain to you a little bit about what these sinkholes are and what they're caused from. There is a such thing as sinkhole season. Just as there's a tornado season and a hurricane season, it speaks to the many factors that contribute to the threat. So they're under threat at the Villages, you know. They might just have something in common with Donald Trump. I can't help myself. I just told you I'm having a lot of fun with this. So basically, this is what happens. Underlying all of these places in Florida is that Florida is built on a bedrock of carbonite, primarily limestone. That rock dissolves relatively easy in rainwater, which becomes acidic as it seeps through the soil. The resulting terrain, called karst, is honeycombed with cavities. When a cavity becomes too big to support its ceiling, it suddenly gives way, collapsing the clay and sand above to leave a cavernous hole at the surface. The main trigger for sinkholes, besides assholes, is water. Too much of it or too little. The normally moist soil of Florida has a stabilizing effect on karst. But during a drought, cavities that were supported by groundwater empty out and become unstable. So excuse me, my chair fell down. During the, let's see. Okay, so Central Florida was in a severe drought at the beginning of 2017, followed by the intense rainfall of Hurricane Irma that hit the villages in September. So this place has been building and building up and building up and building up. It went from, I don't know, several thousand people, and now it's got, I mean, now they're an actual political force in this retirement community. But I think it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious because these people are going to be, their homes are going to sink. I mean, it's funny as shit, but maybe not for them and maybe not for their families. But right now, for me, it's ironically funny. So these events from Mother Nature in 2017 don't account for the spate of sinkholes this year already. The weather in Sumter County has been pretty typical. So what's going on? What's going on? Maybe it's payback. Man-made development, it turns out, is the most persistent factor for increased sinkholes. Earth-moving equipment scrapes away protective layers of soil, parking lots, and paved roads divert rainwater to new infiltration points. The weight of new buildings presses down on the weak spots. And and the buried infrastructure can lead to leaking pipes, and perhaps most of all, the pumping of groundwater disturbs it disturbs and disrupts the delicate water table that keeps the karst stable. Our preliminary research indicates that the risk of sinkholes is 11 times greater in developed areas than undeveloped ones. So Florida, and I was down in Florida because my parents live in Florida. They are snowbirds. So I can make fun of Florida because my parents live there. So I have the right to make fun of Florida and their governor, and I'm going to. And I'm having fun doing it. This place, they're calling it now Sinkhole Alley. And the preliminary and the villages has been in development overdrive. I mean, really overdrive. It was the fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States 4 years in a row, 2013 to 16. And it's still in the top 10. I never knew this. I mean, my folks do not live in a retirement community. They just have a house, they just have a house. They're not driving around on a golf course in a golf cart in a retirement community. So this development is really causing havoc. In 2008 book, Leisureville, journalist Andrew Bleckman reported that the villages would finish its build-out, an industry term for the point where a project is complete in the very near future, peaking at 110,000 residents. Yet a decade later, the population has sped past 125,000. 125,000 right-wing people putting a political party in power. I mean, you can't say that they're all Republicans, but they're overwhelmingly, because that's what at least from the information I read. And I'm sorry, it's very warm in my house, by the way. It's like 82 degrees in the house. Okay. I would never live in Florida for that main reason. It's too hot. It's just too hot. So in a scathing column, Orlando Sentinel's Lauren Ritchie notes how the fledgling community in 1991 had a water permit to use 65 million gallons a year. But by 2017, the rate reached a stunning 12.4 billion gallons a year. The local aquifer in Sumter County is also threatened by a controversial plan by a bottling company to pump nearly 500,000 gallons of water a day and double that rate during the peak months. Despite the protest of villagers worried that a falling water table will spur sinkholes, pumping will begin soon. So they're getting their water taken from them, just like Nestle does in Michigan, right? And they're going to get sunk, pretty much. But they shouldn't be singled out when it comes to sinkholes. Marion and Lake, the two counties that the villages pokes into, are number 4 and number 10, respectively, on Risk Meter's 2011 list of the most sinkhole-prone counties in Florida. Number 1 is Pasco, which abuts Sumter to the south. So last summer, a 260-foot wide sinkhole yawned beneath the Pasco neighborhood, consuming 2 homes and condemning 7 more, making it the county's largest in 30 years. That massive chasm rivaled the epic Winter Park sinkhole in Orange County, number 8 for the Risk Meter, an online tool providing hazard analysis for insurers. I'm wondering if that analysis has been done at Mar-A-Lago. And we're going to talk a little bit about mar-A-Lago and the sinkhole because, like I said, I had a blast researching this today and yesterday. Well, I planned it, but I had a blast, and I'm home alone, and I'm just like, I sound like a crazy person because I'm laughing like crazy, and the people that come on the weekends that have the property behind us, they've got to hear because all the windows are open, and I just think it's funny. All right. So anyway, these people are all worried that they're going to lose their investment. Oh, my God, they're going to lose their investment. So the author spoke with a geologist and sinkhole expert, David Wilshaw, on the same day he was returning from a trip to the villages to inspect a suspected sinkhole. It turned out to be a false alarm. The small depression was caused by a leaking irrigation line, but the shaken resident told Wilshaw she hadn't slept the whole night, afraid the ground would gobble her up. Injuries from sinkholes are rare, but I did read about some guy getting sucked into a sinkhole and they never found his body. Why couldn't it have been Donald Trump? Maybe. A girl can wish, right? We can all hope. Central to that fear factor is how unpredictable they are. They form without warning, and it's difficult to detect weak spots in the ground. Drilling exploration holes in the village is a challenge, says Wilshaw, since rock will be 5 feet down in some places and 100 feet down if you move 20 feet to the side. Wilshaw, who runs his own company specializing in assessing sinkhole risk, is often hired to survey sites using ground-penetrating radar, which is called GPR, which is the best way to detect cavities. But he says many home builders will do absolutely nothing and instead rely on the end user to check for cavities, since Florida law doesn't require it. Florida law doesn't require it. So when you buy a place in the villages, just remember, Florida law doesn't require very much. So can anything help predict sinkholes besides this GPR? NASA technology has shown some potential. Interferometric synthetic aperture radar, which is called INSAR, detects subtle changes in ground elevation over time when the sensor is flown repeatedly over an area susceptible to sinkholes, especially the slow-forming ones called cover subsidence. Yep. When that use for INSAR emerged in 2014, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection reached out to NASA for help. But when I checked with a DEP spokesperson, she said it's not happening anytime soon. So I'm sorry that I'm finding humor in this. I suppose it's kind of cruel maybe to find humor in somebody else's suffering, and I don't typically do. But it just struck me sarcastically when I found out the whole political leaning of the place. It just did it for me. Not all homes qualify for broader coverage either. And Even when a site is surveyed and deemed safe from sinkholes, one can still form a few years later, given the precarious nature of karst. So this is pretty interesting. Florida is built on nothing, and they keep putting these heavy buildings onto top of the land. It's affecting other parts of the land because it's all connected. It's all connected. So even when a sinkhole is repaired or remediated, is the technical term, it will sometimes reopen. Perhaps the most dramatic sinkhole to ever hit the villages in Buttonwood. Just look at this. Oh, there's a picture. I don't know if I can find it. Maybe I can for you. It lurched open several months after remediation began. So did the sinkhole that killed the guy I was telling you about, Jeffrey Bush. So basically, these people, they don't really have much of many options. Buildings not stopping. Progress. They call it progress in Florida. That's not stopping. Last time I was down there, it was building. You saw more cranes than anything. Cranes everywhere. I was in Sarasota, but everywhere I've ever been in Florida, they're always building. They're always doing something, I think. So they have this sinkhole report. It was done in 2017, and it was supposed to be a sought-after predictive map, and they had a hazard mitigation plan, but it's not very detailed. And it says, most importantly, the favorability map is not of sufficient detail to provide site-specific information regarding sinkhole formation. The Villages is primarily located in the northern part of Sumter County, which is almost entirely in the red zone. I'll have to put that picture up after. So how helpful is that report? Is this going to help anybody? I don't think it is the prediction model that some hope for, said Robert Brinkman, a geology professor at Hofstra, who wrote Florida Sinkhole Science and Policy and owns a house in Sinkhole Alley. So he's got a vested interest, wouldn't you say? So I'm going to wrap this up. Some people are tempted to throw in the towel. The damage, it could escalate as climate change intensifies. Now, that is if they believe in climate change. We don't know. Who knows what they believe in? Believe me, if they believe in some of the things I see on the YouTube, they're sunk. But the rainy season came early this year. So after May 20th this week, and that's why we put the article up, after a week of persistent rain, 4 sinkholes struck Calumet Grove, the village that suffered 7 sinkholes in February. Thunderstorms are expected to continue thanks to a subtropical storm system forming off the coast. So that's what they are. That's how it happens. And I know that it's serious. And I know that this land, it's all interrelated. All of this is, there's lava, there's volcanoes in Hawaii, sinkholes in Florida. There's all kinds of ecological things going on everywhere. And it's all driven by man-made activity, except for Hawaii. That's what we don't know for sure. I don't know. I am not a geologist, not at all. I'm going to put me up for a second, and I'm going to go to another article. And in the meantime, I lost something. I'm going to find it, and I am going to bring it on because it's good. And I said I enjoy Twitter, and I'm going to bring this up and see if I can add it up to the broadcast. Okay, here we go. Rick Scott is an asshole. It's an actual Twitter. So I found it, and I loved it. But I'm going to read about Rick Scott a little bit while you look at that lovely Twitter page. And this is Rick Scott. And actually, Rick Scott is a huge climate denier. Rick Scott, I will tell you, Rick Scott was one of the first to have climate change struck out of language in his Department of Environmental Policy or whatever. And scientists are pretty upset with him. Pretty upset. 5 times, I'm going to read this. There's an article in the Miami Times about this dude. And it's called 5 Times Florida Politicians Acted Like Morons on Climate Change. Now, clueless moron is one of my favorite terms that I picked up from a YouTube friend. Clueless moron is what these people really are. What can you say about people that just want to deny it? Like this guy, his state has the propensity to flood. It has miles and miles and miles of coastline. And he's striking these words from their policies. So this article is from actually June 4th, 2017 from the Miami New Times. How malicious and dumb is Donald Trump? He not only pulled out of the historic Paris Agreement to fight climate change this week, but he announced that he'll hold a Pittsburgh, not Paris rally. All right, so you know where this is going, right? So such is the quality of American political discourse. We know the quality of American political discourse. We know how bad the quality is right now. All of us online know this. But we here in Florida have been living in this strange nether reality for quite some time. Though the state for many years has been an environmental catastrophe, the election of Rick Scott in 2011 truly seems to have plunged Florida into pre-Trumpian bizarro world from which we have yet to emerge. Now that Trump pulled out of the Paris Agreement, Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos Jimenez is tap dancing around admitting whether he supports the agreement. Now, of course, this was last year. Here is a brief history of the state's worst climate moves. So, 1, banning the word climate change from public discourse. As first reported by the Florida Center for Investigative Reporting, Tristram Corton, a New Times alum, the state of Florida is the region most susceptible to the effects of global warming in this country, according to the scientists. Sea level rise alone threatens 30% of the state's beaches over the next 85 years. And I don't give it 85 years. But again, not prognosticating. I'm not predicting. I don't give it 85 years. But you would not know that by talking to officials at the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the state agency on the front lines of studying and planning for these changes. DEP officials have been ordered not to use the term climate change or global warming in any official communications, emails, or reports, according to former DEP employees, consultants, volunteers, and records obtained by the Florida Center for Investigative Reporting. So no wonder why those people at the villages are going to sink. And they keep electing these clueless morons. I'm sorry. Babbling like an idiot when asked about global warming at a presidential debate. During a Republican primary debate in the 2016 election cycle, do we remember this, guys? Florida's own Marco Rubio had this to say. Well, about cutting carbon emissions. 1, because America is not a planet, it's a country. Rubio said about the effects of passing laws in America. You know what? I can't even read this whole thing. I cannot read that whole thing to you. We all went through the election. We all lived through Marco Rubio. We all lived through all of them. Did we not? Number 3, meeting with climate scientists for a whole 30 minutes and asking them nonsense. The scientists wanted to urge Scott, Governor Scott, who wants to be Senator Scott, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state and urge a switch to renewable energy. According to the News Service of Florida, Scott didn't seem that interested. Scott, a Republican running for re-election at the time, said little other than to ask whether the professor students were getting jobs in Florida. Clueless moron. I think I'm going to have to call this Friday night show the Clueless Moron Show, because it keeps popping up in my psyche that these people are all involved in all of these environmental things happening, and they're not stopping, right? They're not stopping. Scott didn't reflect on the science. Eckerd College scientist Dave Hastings said afterwards, so he asked modest questions, but he did not ask questions that reflected his understanding of the material. Number 4, trying and failing to replace the phrase climate change with the words atmospheric re-employment for some stupid reason. Atmospheric re-employment. That's a good one. He has been fighting last year against claims by former state employees that his administration banned the use of climate change. While state workers were upping the ante, including news last year that one was ordered into a mental health exam for demanding to use the forbidden words. Oh my God. Scott has remained firm. He says there's no such policy. Let me tell you something. Scott Pruitt probably got part of his ideas and marching orders from Rick Scott, because they're both clueless morons. Who are we kidding? Number 5. The silly political gaffes don't matter as much as one, approving a huge natural gas pipeline. Remember the Sable pipeline, folks? Number 2, letting a Texas oil company look for fracking sites in the Everglades. We reported on this. 3, doing nothing to combat urban sprawl. Did I say that? The biggest thing that you see in Florida, cranes. And letting Florida Power and Light move forward with expanding a nuclear plant where they have hurricanes. And just generally being Florida in the face of so much science. I guess being Florida is being a clueless moron. Although I can't say that everybody is. We have lots of good friends in Florida, and my parents are not clueless morons. But I'm sure their neighbors might be. So we know that Rick is just wonderful, isn't he? He is just one of these people. And I would say that this is pretty accurate, wouldn't you? It's, I like it. I do. But, that's the mood I'm in tonight. I have just been finding these things that are a lot of fun in the face of pretty, awful, terrible things that are going on. We have people like Rick Scott. He wants to be a senator. He doesn't believe in climate change. He wants to, bring his brand of ignorant stupidity to the White House. Let's see, what does Cindy have to say? Do we know for sure Rick Scott is a robot? Right? I'm telling you, you cannot help but find the irony, the ironic humor in these stories. It's good and it's wonderful to learn about the consistency of Florida's land. It's awesome to understand the seriousness of what is happening down there. But it's the theater of the absurd. It is just the theater of the absurd. Mark says, Florida has 20 million people and most are independents and there are more Democrats than Republicans. Okay, I would like to know that, but why do they have Rick Scott as a governor? And I was talking about the villages, but yes, Mark, I will look into that because I'm sure that there are big liberal and progressive hubs down there. For this particular evening, I was commenting on Rick and Donald and Sinkholes and the villages, which happen to have tipped the scales for Donald, our illustrious, wonderful president. So there was another story I came up with that is kind of illustrative of what's going on as well. This one's kind of sad. This is about the kids that are suing Governor Rick Scott to force Florida to take action on climate change. And he doesn't talk about it. And he notoriously declared, I am not a scientist, when asked his thoughts on humanity's well-documented impact on the warming planet. Banned the phrase in his administration, a charge he denies. Nobody else does. And backed up President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Accord. So now an unusual group sued Scott for ignoring the climate threat. Kids. 8 young Florida residents, the youngest is 10, the oldest is 20, and one is a University of Miami marine science student, are the named plaintiffs in a lawsuit that seeks to force the state, extremely vulnerable to climate-driven sea rise, to start work on a court-order science-based climate recovery plan. Now, isn't it amazing that it takes kids to do this? Because we and Rick Scott and all of these backwards politicians, and I say we because I'm a boomer, and I will say this all the time. My generation had a big part of this, but we're leaving them. And these idiot, clown, clueless, moron politicians are leaving them what? They're leaving them that they have to fight, that they have to have lawsuits against politicians and states. The group is represented by Our Children's Trust, an Oregon-based organization sponsoring similar suits from children around the country at state and federal levels. The original case, based on the same arguments, Juliana versus the United States, was filed in 2015 against the federal government. It might sound like a legal stunt, but a federal judge found the argument sound enough to send the case to trial in October. So these kids, they say, Governor Scott says he's not a scientist. Well, neither are most of the people that are forced to take action because the state is failing us. These are kids, guys. There is no dispute that Florida, particularly the low-lying southern tip, is at growing risk from climate change. Miami Beach, which has seen worsening seasonal flooding, has already spent $125 million to keep its streets dry. Those high tides aren't going to get smaller. New research from NOAA shows Miami streets could flood every single day by 2070 under many climate models. In the suit, Reynolds and her lawyers accused Scott and his administration of rolling back or failing to implement any legislation aimed at measuring or cutting back on carbon emissions, as well as ignoring the threat of rising seas on the state's coasts, which provide the economic engine for the tourism-dependent state. So let's see what Scott says. He says, the governor signed one of the largest environmental protection budgets in Florida's history last month, investing $4 billion into Florida's environment. The governor is focused on real solutions to protect our environment, not political theater or a lawsuit orchestrated by a group based in Eugene, Oregon. Well, guess what, Governor Scott? This stuff is going to happen more and more. And you're just basically butt licking because you want to be Senator Scott and you want to bring your brand of damage to the whole country instead of just the state that you're already screwing up. Let's see. What does Jeff have to say? Atmospheric reemployment, job reassignment, fiscally challenged. Who are these a-holes that come up with these terms? I don't know. And Karen says, awful policies. Rick Scott is part of the disease in the GOP. And it's just so easy these days to bust on them because it's a comedy. It's a comedy to me. And although nothing is funny with climate change, and nothing is funny with the decimation of our planet, and deforestation and ocean acidification and sea level rise. Nothing is funny about any of it. It's happening. But these clueless morons, they keep getting elected. And basically because we have Citizens United, we have money in politics, we have so much that's wrong that the right things just have to happen. They have to happen. In Florida, Joanne says it's illegal to go off the grid. One of my teammates, Judy, she lives in Florida, and she has solar, and another friend of mine also does. Let's see here. Brian says, we need a planned evacuation of southern Florida. It hurts, but it's true. Cat 5s will do it for us, though. Thanks, Brian. Yes. Okay, I think we have Senator Nelson is a scientist and an astronaut. Okay, Mark, we'll have to look him up. Really? Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Scott has to beat Bill Nelson, huh? Who is a very loved incumbent. Okay, let's hope he does. Let's hope that everybody that is in Florida is so disgusted, like I am, like so many people are, in the antics that are going on in Washington, that it backfires on this guy. Thank you, Mark, for educating me further than I took it. I appreciate it. So Cindy asks if, let's see. Oh, Karen says the rock guy, Ocean's Rising. Yes, last week's topic that I found also ironically funny. Cindy asked, did we mention the White House sinkhole? Oh yeah, what a coincidence. Well, the White House sinkhole, it really, really let out a flurry of jokes. And oh my gosh, the drain the swamp jokes. God has a page on Twitter, or he has a Twitter site. God says, yes, this was my doing. You're welcome. He can't beat Twitter, I'm telling you. It's like Comedy Central. Okay, let's see. Update. The sinkhole is now a cover-up because they put a cover on it. Oh my God. I'm sorry, guys. Maybe it's just me. But what I do here and what my team does and the articles we read and all the things we do, if you don't have a sense of humor about what is going on, what do you have? You got to be able to laugh at yourself. And I laugh all the time. I do cry. You know, I cry over these situations. But quite frankly, we have to be active. And that just leads me to say, we've got to vote. And we've got to get our neighbors to vote in 2018 elections. They're coming up, like in my state, in a matter of weeks. And these are the primaries. They're very important, I think, even though in New York, our primaries are not the way I would like to see them. I want to read you a little bit more on a funny thing here. This is from a thing I found called The Root. No, seriously, Earth is literally trying to drain the swamp, starting with Donald Trump, and it's by a writer named Monique Judge. She says, I'm not a religious person, so I don't believe in heaven or hell. I don't think of the devil as some evil being residing just below the Earth's crust, dragging all the evil people down there to live with him for eternity, because they were horrible people who deserve to suffer forever. If I did think that, however, I would say the devil's busy. He's been trying to pull his little brother, Donald John Trump, first of his name, racist evil incarnate, he of the orange spray tan, mini hands, and even littler wee-wee, down into the depths with him. It's where he belongs. News reports surfaced Tuesday that a sinkhole had opened at the White House. That was the devil's, or Earth's, attempt at taking this fucker down. But it wasn't the only attempt made. Time magazine reports that a 4x4 sinkhole opened in front of Trump's Mar-A-Lago estate in 2017. So here we go. The jokes were just abounding. And I thought she was pretty good. So really, folks, that's what I got tonight. I wanted to talk about that article. And I mean, we have so many articles. It was really hard to choose this week because as I put up and as people will drop things into our chat so that we have these great articles, there were some really tough ones. There was one, of course, there was Hawaii, what's going on in Hawaii. And but I'm not qualified to talk about the real geological stuff. I want to bring somebody on here, and I'm working on somebody. And all of a sudden now I can't seem to get down to the page to keep going to get any more articles to tell you. But there was also one more that I'm going to tell you about that I liked, that I considered doing tonight, but I can't because there's not enough time. And it was, oh geez. Well, you know what? sometimes it's hard to find, and I will put it up because, well, it's up, but I'll put a link so you know what it was. It was an interesting article, but it was about energy. It was completely different. And being that it's about 90 degrees, I'm what? I'm showing up and showing out. Oh, is that because I'm moving around the screen? Okay, wait, I'll go solo. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to end this tonight because it's really, really, really very warm in this room. And I think all my humor and laughing made me tired. But let's see. Jeff says, "Oh, bring on Jess." I know. I want to bring Jess on. I think she's a geologist, and I think she would be great. And Mark says, "We need to sacrifice him to the volcano gods." There's a lot of things we need to do, guys, but we need to vote in the primaries. We need to get these climate denying craps out. And I think my internet's going, so I'm going to say goodnight. I'm losing my internet. And Mark, thanks for being with us tonight. The Big Island is calling for him. I'm glad you joined. Good night, everybody. Peace. See you next Friday.